Hi guys, welcome back to Scalemotor. Today we're going to be doing the final part of the Tamiya CBR1000RR-R, and we're going to be focusing on the decals and the clear coat. And then there's a little bit at the end of some sped up final assembly. So to start off, what I'm doing here is I'm using a piece of clear plastic with tape over the top, and I put the decal, the Repsol decal, behind, and then I use this as a template to cut a kind of thin clear plastic mask, I suppose you could call it. And my original idea was I was going to use this to paint the Repsol logos on. However, after kind of holding it against the bike, I realized that was just going to be a lot more effort than it was worth. However, I've left this in because I did use this piece of clear plastic, not for painting, but I used it to help me line up the decals and to kind of visualize where everything would go, as you can't see through the decals. So all I'm doing here now is just using a file just to clean up my cuts, and after this now you'll see I get the bike down and one fairing is on, and I'll just use this this clear mask, I suppose, just to get a feel for where the decals are going, and I can use this then so I know which bits I can cut off the decals, bits which aren't going to get seen, and then I can use it to kind of make up decals for the rest. So straight in, I've got the microset and microsol out in front of me. The blue one, the microsol, I put down before putting the decal down, and then we just leave the decal in the warm water. I've left it in there for about a minute, then pull it out, pop it on the back of my hand where it's easier to get to, and just peel it off and pop it where it needs to go. There's a bit of fiddling, just so you can kind of line it up and get it where it needs to go, just popping that in the bin. And then once we have the decal exactly where we need it, we come in with the microsol, which is in the red bottle, and we'll just apply a thin coat of that over the top of the decal so it starts to kind of soften and conform. I did snip the decal where it goes over that hole just so it would fold around nicely. But yeah, once we've got this microsol down, all we're going to do is pop this piece to the side, and we leave it to we leave the microsol to work its magic for 10 minutes or so. Next up was the front nose cone. This was super simple. It didn't really require any of the microsol because there's not that much contouring. But again, we've put the microset down, popped the decal in the water for about a minute, and we've just peeled it off and popped it straight on. And I used my thumbs then just to squeeze out any excess moisture and kind of set the decal exactly where it needs to go. Just gently pushing down on the decal just to push out any excess water, and what you find if you do it this way is the decal will become a little bit harder to move, so just kind of make sure it's where you want it. And then I'm just rolling over with the cotton bud just to make sure all that moisture's out from underneath. And then we're going back to the fairing now. It's been sitting for about 10 minutes while we've done the other decal, and I'm just going back over it with the microsol just to make sure all those corners fold in and conform. It might look a little messy on the inside areas where we're kind of folding it over now, but the inside areas which are going to be seen later on, I do come in with a cocktail stick which has just been dipped in the microset, and just gently rub away the parts which are going to be seen, and they'll come off. Then onto the tail. All I done was pop the two side tail fairings on and the rear seat, and I've popped the decal on where it needs to go. Again, we've got the microset down before we put the decal on, and then once we've got this exactly where we need to where we need it. We're going to use the microsol again, leave it for about 10 minutes so it starts to mold itself to the surfaces, and then we'll come in with a hobby knife and cut very, very gently down the sides of that rear seat cover, so we can take that off and then finish the decal processing. Then we've done the tank cover, which is right up the front, which covers the airbox, and there were two decals on here, both on top of each other. This one's simple enough to place, a bit of microset down and then decal on top, and then once we got it where we need it, I used my thumb and a cotton bud to roll out any any excess moisture from underneath, as you can see here. And this cotton bud has a little bit of microsol on, just so it'll help it conform. And then once that's down exactly where we need it, there's another decal which goes into that white circle, which as long as your decal is kind of where it needs to be and all the excess moisture from underneath is gone, it shouldn't move too much, and you can pop on any decals over the top. I put the cover on the bike for this just because it was a little bit easier, but this decal, there's no raises or body shapes it needs to conform around, so it was simple enough to just pop on, push with the cotton buds we do in here just to push out any excess moisture, and it'll be fine, it'll be good to go. Then we moved on to the lower fairings. So again, we had to do a little bit of fiddling and a little bit of cutting. The Honda logo on the side here, which is what I'm popping on here, is a little bit too big, but we popped it on and just wrapped it round so it could still be seen. And I thought if that looked bad, I could just cut that A off later on and use the micro set to soften it and then peel it off, but it didn't look too bad, and I left it how it was. It was a bit big because obviously the lower piece of fairing on the race bike is a different size. And then we moved on to the Honda logo on the other side. Now this has got like a cut out of it, and the O is a slightly weird shape just because of the way it sat on a kind of vent on the race bike fairings. So we're just going to cut that kind of weird shaped bit of the O off, and then we'll apply that later on to where it needs to be, and any kind of other strange shapes, anything over. What we're going to do then is we'll come in with some paint and just touch the areas up. So here we've got that cut decal on, which is why you can see it just is just half of the word Honda. But again, like we said, like we've done throughout the whole thing, we're going to put a bit of microset down, get it where it needs to go. This part didn't need any microsol, any softener, because it was just on a nice flat surface and it would stick down nice and fine. And now we're just sticking on the first part, the H and the O. This is a little bit trickier, just because it has to not just be in line, but it's got to connect to the other part of the O and the other part of the decal. But once it's on, you can kind of push it around with either a cocktail stick or your tweezers, whatever you're comfortable doing. You can even use your finger. And now what we're doing is just that little tiny triangle we cut out previously off the Honda logo. We're just going to get that on and stick that in where it needs to go. If you are using tweezers like me, I'm using some precision pointy tweezers. Just make sure you don't scratch any paintwork or rip any decals. The decals in this kit are a little bit brittle, so once or twice there were times where I may have slightly ripped a decal. It was easy to fix though. And here there's just these two little circular logos which go on the front end of the fairing. And again, these were super simple to put on. Just pop them in place and then use the cotton bud to roll out any extra moisture. Next up was the black carbon effect lines along the bottom with the sponsor logos on. This side was easy enough. Again, the other side was easy too. I just had to snip a little bit off. These ones were a little bit brittle when I done the RC213V. And I had to use one from my spare set. It was the one that went along the bottom, right underneath, because I did manage to rip it. But luckily enough, we didn't need it for the scheme on this bike. But again, micro set down, decal down, roll the cotton bud over, push out any excess moisture, and with this, there's a slight bulge in the back where the exhaust, where the fairing goes over the exhaust. So a little bit of the microsol was applied just to make sure it conformed. Next, we were doing the Repsol decals on the fins for the fairing. Now, what I done is I popped the fins on and then used that clear mask thing we cut earlier just to line everything up. These wings or fins or whatever you like to call them, the aero, were a bit of a nightmare. This side wasn't too bad because the tops of most of the letters are cut off, so we just cut from a decal that we already had, and then stuck them on one by one, and it was only the first couple of letters we needed. All I'm doing now is just popping the fairings on the bike just to kind of get a feel of how it looks and where I need to put things, so that when you look at it from a certain angle it says Repsol. What I'm doing now is just chopping a bit that I didn't need, just so it would fold around the corners of the aero easier. And these are applied the exact same way we've been doing it. Micro set down, get it in place, then we're using here a bit of the microsol just to soften the decal to get it to conform. Just very, very gently easing it into place with the tweezers. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have used these tweezers because I'm a bit of a liability on times, and I'm actually surprised I didn't end up scratching any paint. Okay, next up is the S. This was a bit tricky, so I had to cut it completely out from the decal that was left over, just because of the shape of it, and the surrounding area was white, so we didn't want that, just in case it was a slightly different shade of white. So I've cut the S out, and it did leave some kind of feathery edges, which wasn't really much of a problem because we come in later to touch that up with a paintbrush, but obviously it would be better off avoided. And again, here with the P, I just used the R, which we weren't going to use, and I just chopped off the little bit of the R that comes down, turning it into a P. and now we're just getting that on, and again following the exact same method we've been doing. I feel like I'm repeating myself and boring you guys, but I just thought it'd be nice to show just how much modifying went into the decals. You've obviously got the beauty of the sped up version, but I spent ages umming and ahhing and wondering how I was gonna get this done. Okay, next up we went ahead and added the 93 decals, which is Marc Marquez's racing number. We've just got to pop one each side on the windscreen, and we didn't use much decal solution for this. We put a tiny bit of micro set down just to kind of prime the area for the decal, and then wiped the majority of it off with the cotton bud, but because it went down on a nice flat surface, it didn't really need the micro sol. So next up we were testing which paint would be the best to kind of fix the feathered edges of the cut decals. First up, I've tried the Repsol aqua colour. I've seen this used in a few videos, and it does brush paint really, really nicely. However, I don't think it matches the decal colour greatly, so we went ahead and we used some semi-gloss black X18 from Tamiya, and we just done the same thing. We just got a little bit on the paintbrush and coloured in next to a spare decal we had, and it does seem that the semi-gloss black was a much better kind of match for the colour of the decal. Okay, so now we're going to use that semi-gloss black to touch up the feathery edges of that S we cut out. This was quite fiddly, and it was a bit scary because one slip and I'm going to be having to use thinner to clean it off, and yeah, it could mess a lot of things up. But if you take your time, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. Start kind of on the inside of the area that you're painting. So with that S decal, I started in the middle of the decal and kind of worked my way out just until the edges weren't feathered and they were nice and smooth. I'm using my other hand, my left hand, to brace my right hand just to stop it from shaking. And then we're going to use the LP2 gloss white from Tamiya. We're going to be using this just to touch up the outside of various other decals which might have which maybe you've ripped or are slightly different shape to what they should be. Like the O on this Honda logo was a bit wonky just because it's meant to kind of wrap around a certain part on the race bike fairing, so it left a kind of weird wobble. And now we are using the Tamiya black accent colour panel wash, and we're just going to go through all the kind of little outside bits like the foot pegs, the foot rests, and all the kind of little bits that I like to leave till last, because I will end up knocking them off if I do them beforehand. But we're going to just kind of pull it on and then get rid of the majority of the excess while it's still wet with just light dabs of the cotton bud, and it'll suck up the excess wash, and then when it dries, it'll dry a little bit lighter, and then if there's still too much, you can come in with a cotton bud with a little bit of lighter fluid or mineral spirits to clean up any of the dry excess. But I'm just going through all kind of the contours and the the bolt heads and any areas where it looks like it's meant to be two separate parts. I'll make sure it's in there a little bit thicker, just so it does look like there is a line separating them. Well, that was useless. Camera didn't focus there. We're also adding the panel wash to the gear selector and the shift linkage. We done the rear brake master cylinder. There's a couple of bits and bobs you'll see here which were previously brush painted. I didn't really want to show much of that, to be honest, because the kind of main focus of this video I wanted to be the decals and just popping everything together. Next up, we're just using the Pilot silver pen. It's a silver paint marker and it leaves a nice kind of chromy colour, but just get anything that's hard. Don't use paper because it will dry up the paint really quick. Get anything that's hard and you're not going to use. In my case, it's a scent, a US scent, and I'm not going to use that because, well, I'm in Wales. So, yeah, just squeeze a bit of the paint out onto that, and then you can use a brush of your choice to brush paint any kind of little bits and bobs. And all I'm using it for here is the reflective part of the lights inside the wing mirrors. And then we're going to use the X27 clear red, and we're using this to paint the rubber wheels for the rear side stand. I found it's nice and easy if you glue them to a cocktail stick. Keep your paintbrush still and just twist the part like a spinning top. The X27 we're using is completely unthinned, just because it's a nice thick paint, and it does go down really, really well whether you thin it or not. And we've done this for all four of the wheels for the paddock stand. Again, something I like to leave till last, because the amount of times I pick up and move the bike, I'll end up knocking them off and either losing them or breaking them. Okay, and now we're just going to do the kind of mirror effect transfers for the rear view mirrors or the wing mirrors. These are super duper simple to do. All you do is make sure you've got the right one, and then I like to cut them out and peel away the backing paper. There's a clear piece of kind of plastic paper over the top, and you want this to come with the transfer, just because it's the easiest way to stick it down. And then you can hold that, line it up where it needs to go, and then once it's there, just give it a little push down. And then I like to use a cotton bud, and I use this to just burnish it down and just make sure it's pushed down nice and firmly. And then once you've used the cotton bud, you'll just peel away that plastic, and it should leave the transfer where it needs to be, and you haven't got your greasy fingers all over it, you haven't smudged paint all over it, and it's nice and reflective and super duper clean. And then it was on to clear coat, and we're using the Mr. Hobby H101 Premium Acrylic Clear. I was going to use 2K, but I had this here and I've not really had a problem with it in the past over decals, so I thought I'd give it a go. It's thinned with the Tamiya Lacquer thinner with retarder, and I've gone pretty heavy on the thinner. I've gone about 70-30 at least, and all we're going to be doing is just for the first coat we're going to be building up a very, very light coat, just to kind of protect those decals, just so it's not, it's almost dust, so it's not wet and there's nothing really that can destroy the decals if you go nice and light with it. I think we've done about 3 of these thin coats just to make sure. Now I don't think 3 was needed. I think you could probably get away with 1 or 2, but I really didn't want to mess anything up because I knew that I didn't have any replacement decals to hand, and I'd end up having to buy a whole new kit again just for the replacement decals. So like I said, we're just going around each part and doing a very light pass, and then once we've done the third one, we'll come in with a wetter coat. I'm angling the parts to the light, which is why you might not be able to see the part that I'm painting, just so I can just about see that paint go down. And then once that's done, I believe this is the 4th coat, and you can see we're going on quite a bit thicker. I'm literally doing a wet coat, just spraying as much on as it takes to make it look wet, make it look like it's been doused. You don't go too thick, obviously, so it starts running and dripping, because then that'll just mean a lot of work later. This is the way I've done it in the past on my models, and in between coats I've left it about 5 to 10 minutes to dry, again just to be on the safe side. But doing it this way, I've never had any issues with decals, and once it's dry, to me it looks like it doesn't even need polishing. You can obviously polish it if you want a flatter, more rich, kind of deep shine. But once I was done and it was dry, I didn't think this needed it. And now we're on to assembly, and we're just going to speed it up a bit because I had about an hour and a half's worth of footage for this, so there's little bits and bobs cut out, but again I'm using the Rocket Rapid CA gel, and I'm just using a cocktail stick to apply it. I always use the super glue for painted parts, just because I don't like using the extra thin because it makes paint run and things. But yep, so we're going to pop on our rear sets, which is where your feet go. We'll be adding the brake master cylinder, the rear brake master cylinder, the shift linkage. We've also got there the side stand, which screws on with the 2.5mm screw. Don't worry about the sizes. They do call out the sizes in the manual, and the pictures of the screws in the manual are at a scale, so they're the right size. So just make sure you check that, because you want to make sure you're using the right screw. Now we're just connecting up the rear master cylinder to the brake fluid reservoir, which is tucked up in the frame there. And this is just the coolant overflow bottle, which just pops onto the side of the bike here, and it gets hidden just under the fairings. You'll see me throughout this just kind of test fitting everything, making sure there's been no kind of issues with the paint, just to make sure everything fits in as it should. And then as we go along, we're using the silver pen from Pilot again just to catch any bolt heads which may have been rubbed off or we may have missed, or on parts which we've recently painted and not had a chance to get in with the pen. So next up, we just came to installing all of the fairings. First we installed the tank. This attaches with two 2.5mm screws. Again, the screw sizes are all called out in the manual. The only reason I haven't checked these is because towards the end of the build here, they're all the same size. So it was not a problem, just grab whatever we've got left in the dish and start screwing in. And now we've got the filler cap, which I lost until just before we started painting the clear coat. Luckily it was found. I didn't want to have to buy another kit. And here I'm just showing the Honda decal on the side of the tank. I think that came out really nice, and with the clear coat it gives it a really nice shine. So we've got the side kind of cover pieces. Again, these are screwed on with the 2.5mm screws. It's hard to get these wrong. There's only kind of one place this will screw into. Just do be careful you're not kind of forcing it where it shouldn't go. And then as we're going along, we're going to use the silver pen again just to get the bolt heads for the fairings. Or we could have used the photoetch. I didn't have enough of the same photoetch, and I didn't kind of want the fairing bolts to all be mismatched, so we went ahead with the silver pen, and I don't think it looks too bad. And then we've just got these two little black covers, trim pieces, I believe. There's one for each side, and again they do go on a specific side, so just be careful when installing them. And it was at this point I realised I should probably be wearing gloves, because even though we've left the clear coat cure for a good few hours, and it's normally touch dry after the good few hours, I just really didn't want to end up leaving massive fingerprints in the clear coat. So a pair of gloves and some delicate hands help with that greatly. So again, we're just test fitting the pieces before we pop them on, just to make sure everything still lines up as it should. With the clear coat I did go quite thick, so I just wanted to make sure that I didn't go too thick and cause fit issues. Next up, we're just doing the rear seat cover. Pretty simple, just a little pad we've glued onto the front, and then this just pops onto a locating point on the frame. I didn't bother gluing this on just because the fit was nice and snug and it wasn't really going to fall off. And then later on down the line, if I did want to put the rear seat on for whatever reason, I could just pop this off, super duper simple. Now we're just popping the front screen in, and then we've used no CA glue on the screen, but we're using super glue on this little bracket which goes onto the back, and that will hold the screen in place nicely. Then there's a little kind of locating nub on the front, and it just slides straight on, and there's no glue, and then that can be taken off easier later on. With the side fairings, we had to pop these fins through, which form part of the aero, and I just popped them in and then pop the side fairing on just to make sure it fits nice, and it does. So we're just gonna pop in another 2.5mm screw just to hold this in nicely. They will have a little bit of a wobble when the screws are in, but that's not a problem, because when we pop the other fairing pieces on, they'll hold these pieces in place nicely. And now it's on to the bottom fairing. This was obviously in two parts, and we've just super glued it together. Normally on race bikes I'd do this well before painting, just because these are normally one piece on race bikes, so there'll be a lot of sanding and filling. But on this it was super simple. You just glue it together, pop side stand down, because that makes it easier, and then slide the bottom fairing on. It was a little bit fiddly because of the way it clips on, and the only way it is connected is it kind of clips to these two side pieces, and there's one little clip towards the back on the opposite side. I like the way these fairings are put together though, because they are they're easily, you can take them off should you need to, and I do really like that. This little tiny piece on the back end, which was a bit of a nightmare to fit because of how I'd mounted it for painting. I popped a little super glue on the end of a cocktail stick and then attached it to the bottom of the part, which made a couple of fit issues. So just off camera I had to get in there with a craft knife just to pull out any kind of CA that was left, and that way we're really on the home straight. We've got kind of everything on the back end added, and now we just add in our wing mirrors with again just a little dab of CA glue, and they fit right in. The front end fairing is still removable after this, because these kind of fit into that bracket we glued onto the fairing earlier on. And now we're just going to go around one more time with the Pilot Silver pen, just to get the bolt heads on the fairings, just to pull it all together. And here it is. I've absolutely loved building this one. Although it's not my most detailed model, it's definitely been one of my favourite to build, even with the masking and the decal issues. But if you've enjoyed this as much as I have, then please don't forget to subscribe, give the video a like, and comment and let me know what you thought. Again, any feedback is welcomed. But in the meantime, have a great day and stay safe.